Hello folks, and welcome to our game here with myself, Shane Tailteann. I'm joined this week by Jason Byrne of the Irish Sun and also Ciaran Carey as ever. Neil McManus of Antrim is going to join us later, and John O'Mahony will be talking a little bit of football. So I'll start off with you, Ciaran. How excited are you for this weekend of hurling? Clare against Dublin and Tipperary against Galway?
Yeah, and I suppose, Shane, two cracking games really in the Gaelic grounds, a double header, and thankfully, the JSC are seeing a bit of sense, and the weekend, weather-wise, supposed to be top class. And two very interesting games for various reasons. And I suppose Dublin, really, when you look at Dublin, for me, at any given day, they're capable of beating anybody, but they just appear to lack a bit of consistency and a bit of mental toughness. They had Galway on the racks there in the first half, and, just that bit of softness didn't follow through. But yet, and they kind of, showed that same frailty in the first half against Carlow. And fair play to Carlow, they lived them for the first half, and it took the second half for Dublin to come out and actually put them away. The Tipperary Galway game, I suppose, looking at that fixture, Shane, for me, a lot of this is going to come down to pins and legs. Tipperary, to be fair, after having an outstanding year, a very good year for the first year for Cahill, bar one match, which was the Waterford game. And they're after fairly putting that right in the last game against Offaly. You only can play what's in front of you, and they're absolutely ruthless with their performance.
Yeah, Jason, what are you thinking this weekend? You were at Tipp Offaly last weekend, so you got a fair flavour of what Tipp are like and also what Liam Cahill had to say afterwards.
Yeah, just as Ciaran was saying there, ruthless would be the word, Shane. At half time when they were so far ahead, you were thinking, okay, he'll run the bench here, he'll move back down a couple of gears and start looking at next weekend. But they just kept on coming and kept banging in the goals. And I think they had 13 different scorers. Connor Stakelin was excellent. I think he got 6 points from play. Jake Morris got a hat trick. They just kept coming and didn't give Offaly any mercy at all. And Liam said after the game he wanted to get that Waterford game out of the system. That's what it was all about. And they were just never going to stop. And they kept on coming with the goals. And, Galway have taken a fair kicking since that Leinster final. In fairness to Pádraig Mannion, he stood up and faced the media a couple of days after that, after that kick clearance went straight to Killian Buckley. And yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people are saying you don't know which Galway team are going to turn up, but nothing brings the best out of them like Tipp in a knockout championship game. So it'll be some day inside in the Gaelic grounds on Saturday.
Yeah, Ciaran, I was just looking at the stats there. In 11 of the last 15 meetings between Tipp and Galway, there's been just, I think, one score between them, and 3 of the last 4 have been separated by 1. So irrespective of how people think Tipp are going and Galway are going, these are neighbours. They love rutting antlers with each other. It's going to be tight.
Oh, without a doubt, Shane. And even go back to Jerry McInerney, Pete Finnerty, Fox in English days, they would have crossovers a lot back then. So this particular game appears to be its own little identity in itself. And, and I suppose, when you look at the weekend, like the Tipp squad presently at the moment under Cahill, the one thing that I spotted at the start of the year, they appear to be a lot more fitter, a lot more sharper, a lot more hungrier. He's playing a lot of young guys, whereas Galway are slightly different. A very seasoned campaign, a very, I suppose, a team that's very seasoned, has been on the go for the last number of years. So I think Cahill will be looking for joy Saturday night, especially if the weather is hot. But as you rightly pointed out, all of that could go out the window Saturday night. But if Tipp stick to their guns and stick to the blueprint up to now, I'll give them a great chance.
And Tipperary haven't beaten Galway since 2016. There was that run, Jason, of brilliant matches between Tipp and Galway. 2014, I think Galway were up by 6 and Tipp had a big rush late on to sort of pull away a little bit. 2015, I think that was the day Shane Maloney got that famous winner after Joe Canning's diagonal. And this game went down to the wire. 16 was the day that Bubbles came on and scored that brilliant goal. I think John McGrath assisted and he sort of smacked it into the ground right on the end line. And then 2017 was that, the famous photo of Joe Canning smiling and as his ball is going over the bar and they go on to win the All-Ireland. These games are crackers.
They're absolutely unbelievable. And I think the one thing that Galway look to really target is that Tipp defence, given that they conceded 3-18 against Offaly. Now, the penalty was quite soft, but the fact that they did concede 2 other goals, I'm sure Liam Cahill wasn't very happy with that. I'm sure they'll be doing everything in their power to get Cahill Barrett back in the pitch at the weekend. Ronan Maher went off with a knock as well, so they'll be praying he's okay. And just the short turnaround can definitely cost teams at this time of year, and we've certainly seen that, like, you know, with Limerick, like with Declan Hannon, you know, like that's, you know, that's just the nature of the season. Now, if you pick up an injury, it can just rule you out for the whole thing. So it's going to be absolutely class. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. You know, from a Galway point of view as well, they'll be so disappointed with that Leinster final, just the way they lost it, the nature of it, last puck of the game. Like, it's just a heartbreaking way to lose. But, you know, they done so much right in that game as well. Like, I thought Conor Whelan was just exceptional, and you know, when he's on form, he's just so difficult to stop. So, you know, he's going to be a massive challenge alone for Tipp. Like, even though that, you know, Joe Canning hurt them so many times in those big days at Croke Park, I think when Whelan's on form, he can really produce the goods, because, you know, the likes of Conor Cooney maybe hasn't been at his best this year. So, but when someone like Conor Whelan can get into his full stride, he's just very, very hard to stop. And, you know, the fact that the Tipp racked up such a big score as well, like, you know, that'll do wonders for their confidence. Like I said, Jake got a hat-trick. Actually, it was Mark Keogh that got 3-3. It was so hard to keep up to date with the scores. It was just, they were flying over left, right, and centre. Like, and then there was a thunderstorm at the end, and they just never took their feet off Offaly's throats. It was just so ruthless. Like, and just, as I said before, they wanted to get that Waterford result out of the system and go into this game now with a great deal of confidence.
It was ruthless to the point of being impolite. Normally teams pull up a little bit. Aidan, hard to say on smaller fish. Like Ciaran, like Jason just talked about the forwards that Galway have, but he was talking about the forwards that Tipp have. And, you know, he obviously is a former Galway player, scored that winning goal a couple of years ago against Tipp, and he goes, I know that Jake Morris, Jason Ford and Mark Keogh, but I still have my doubts about some of those guys. When Galway bring the fight on Saturday, I don't know if these boys will be ready for it. I'd love to see Brian Kincannon, Whelan, Cathal Mannion going down the throat of Tipperary, testing Brian O'Mara, testing the backs, testing the Mahers, testing Breen. Can he take 2 or 3 guys running at him? He still looks a bit uncomfortable for me at full back. There'll be a real test for him if we can go down the middle. So Aidan Hart very much sees weaknesses in this Tipperary team. Ciaran, do you think he's making some fair points?
I suppose when you look at it from this point of view, Shane, what we're discussing here, I suppose the tradition that's between Tipperary and Galway down through the years. Galway would like to come with that mentality and probably would upset Tipperary. But if Tipperary stick to their game plan and implement what they're implementing up to now, Shane, you know, with the pace, the speed of the forwards, keeping the ball going, you know, I think Galway will struggle. And, you know, the corner forward, I totally agree with your speaker there. You know, Whelan was outstanding, but the other corner forward, Nadel, I can't give his name the last day.
Nyland.
He got 4 or 5. What's his name again?
Nyland.
Yeah, I thought he was outstanding. You know, it's the first time I've seen. Yeah, they have a bit of a gym, and this guy, he takes a bit of watching, you know, and he's not afraid to come out in the middle of the field, gather his own ball, win his own ball, you know. But I still think that, Shane, obviously that's coming from a Galway perspective, and I suppose, you know, it would suit Galway if kind of Galway turned this into a bit of a battle. And we kind of, the Tipperary Galway games of old, let's go down that road, see how we get on. I think that's possibly their only chance. But I think if Cahill goes about his business, open it up, stretching and keep the ball moved as quick as he can, you know, it's inevitable, Shane, with the forwards Tipperary have, they're going to get joy and they're going to hurt Galway during the spells. But I suppose it's how much they're going to hurt them when they have the spells.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring up on the screen here my predicted sort of 15s here. You know, it might be a little bit different come today, but is Cathal Barrett going to mark Brian Kincannon, or will he come out on Conor Whelan? I think in the past, Tipperary have great success when Barry Heffernan's been fit, and he's marked Conor Whelan. He's done a great job in him a couple of times. And I wonder then who goes on who. So Joseph Cooney, he'd been very good for Galway this season, but the last day out, David Blanchfield spoiled him in the air, caught a few balls over him. And I wonder, could Owen Connolly be the man for him there? But perhaps Owen Connolly be closer to his own goal on Kevin Cooney. So there's some matchups here that I think are crucial, and including this one, Ciaran. Pádraig Mannion has been moved into the full back line an awful lot recently because, to my money, they don't fully trust their full back or their corner back options. So he's back marking a pacey guy. I don't know if he'll like marking Mark Keogh. I don't know if Gerard McInerney will like to mark Jason Ford, because I don't see Seamus Callanan starting this game, Ciaran, because he's been really, really good this year at times, but he is an older player. He's played, like, he wasn't particularly brilliant against Waterford. it's probably more beneficial to use him off the bench and bring Gerard O'Connor back in for a start again, assuming he's fully right. But are there any matchups or areas that you think are key, Ciaran?
Well, from a Tipperary point of view, Shane, they will go about their business up front as usual. But you're particularly right with, and I said it the last time, like Gerard McInerney and Dahi Burke, two outstanding players. And I'll mention John Conlon as well for Clare, doing an outstanding job. But the bottom line here is you need to be able to get around the field in the modern game if you're going to kind of cut out a bit of grass, cut out a bit of space. So if anything, I think it's Tipperary that will be asking the questions here earlier on probably Dahi Burke and on probably Gerard McInerney. And they'll want to kind of test them earlier on and test their legs. That's the way I probably see it going. So from a Tipperary point of view, I don't think it'll be a concern up around the forwards. But for Galway, there will be a lot of thinking around that. But you're right with Jamie Conlon. But to be fair to him, he looks very fresh this year, very fit. And, anytime I saw him this year coming off the bench, he did look kind of dangerous. So I think, up to say about the old Dine West, Shane, there's a little sting left in him yet. So, they'll probably hold him back, because as I said, he looks very fit, looks very fresh. And, he's probably saying to himself, right, I have one more cut at this now. Let's give it everything I got. So, he could be a trump card as well in the background.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is Cathal Mannion going to be dropping back like he did the last day? And, how will Tipperary look to exploit that? Because I don't think he has massive defensive instincts. And I think he's a brilliant forward. And Jason, in some ways, Tipperary have been nearly delighted to see him 90 yards from goal.
Yeah, and they definitely would. Shane, it seems like they're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul a wee bit to having him back there. I'd say the Offaly game was all about just getting minutes into him after that injury. When it looked like maybe he was a bit doubtful for it. I think he had a hamstring injury. So definitely the Galway supporters will want to see him a bit further up the field. I thought Kevin Cooney was excellent against Offaly as well. Be interesting to see how Tipp handle him. He's kind of coming a bit from left field, but I think he's been a wonderful addition for Galway. It really, really impressed me in the Leinster final. And there's so many areas to have to worry about there. And if Cahill's further up the field, that's definitely going to be one of them. But you're on about the Galway defence there as well. Like Dahi and Gerard can be so interchangeable too, depending on how Tipp set up top as well. So that's going to be a big weapon for Henry Shefflin as well.
Yeah, like Ciaran, would you be too bothered about swapping those two around if you were thinking, okay, Gerard McInerney, let him fight with Gerard O'Connor, for example, out in the half forward line, and we'll just put Dahi Burke back there to see if he can shut down Jason Ford, who looks like he's in serious form after his comeback last week.
Yeah, but the two guys were mentioned, Shane, I suppose that they're two thoroughbreds, right? And I trust both of them in both positions, to be fair. And I suppose both of them still hugely influential for Galway. Like if Galway are going to kind of jump the fence Saturday, these two guys normally need to have a major performance and a major say in the game. Both of them, to be fair, can start in 6 and 3 and do a particular job. But I would say, it's Tipperary will be probably looking for the space. They'll be watching the Padraig Mannion. If he does go back a touch, then we need to get Joy and we need to hurt them. And if they are going to do that, then Galway will obviously push Manning out, and then you're left with the issue again. So, Shane, I suppose from a manager's point of view, you have to trust the guys. They're there a while. 9 times out of 10, those two guys, when you look at their career, they're coming up with 8 out of 10 performances all the time. So you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. And, the night it's in it and everything, it's a knockout at this stage. So you'll be expecting when the pressure is on the big guns, Shane, the big guns usually come to the party.
And will Galway, for once now, will we see Brian Kincannon, Conor Cooney, Conor Whelan, will they all catch fire at the one time, Ciaran? Because I don't think we've seen it in the one game yet where they all click.
No, but Shane, you're right. That's the bottom line. They all have to come, the whole lot of them. And Cooney, and in fairness to Whelan, he's taken a bit of stake. But for me, he's been outstanding for Galway down through the years. But if Galway are to win, Shane, they'll want at least 8 or 9 players coming to a level of performance, 8 or 9 out of 10 if they're going to jump to finish Saturday night. That's about the size of it. And you're 110% like that. They lack that bit of consistency. They're a bit like Dublin. They'll beat anyone on their day. It's just a matter of kind of getting a bit of consistency, getting a bit of mental toughness and a bit of more self-belief to say, yes, we do deserve to be here. We have the personnel. And Galway have personnel in every line, Shane. So if you can imagine, if they all come to the party they could take a bit of stopping.
And Jason, then like you look at those matches we talked about earlier from 2014 to 2017 inclusive, Galway were actually probably bullying Tipp a little bit in some of those games, and Tipperary were trying to compete athletically with them. But this Tipp team now has Dan McCormack, Conor Stacklem, Alan Tynan's a pig as well, and I mean that in a good way as well. Seamus Kennedy's getting stuck in. I mean, this Tipperary team's a bit more sort of, I suppose, prepared for that sort of war.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, when Galway won that All-Ireland in 2017, it was all about their physicality and how they were kind of bullying other teams and their sheer size, and the likes of Garrod and Dahi Burke just kind of bustling forwards out of games. So, like, as you said, Tipp definitely have that kind of now in abundance in buckets and spades throughout their team. You know, I think it'll be interesting to see from a Galway point of view as well if Jason Flynn starts, because when he came on against Kilkenny, he looked like a man possessed. He came on for Tom Monaghan, who was one of Galway's best players last year and has been a real find for Henry as well. But, you know, he got a brilliant goal, and I thought he really lit up that attack. And when you're talking about in terms of Galway's full attack clicking, you know, that's definitely what they're going to need. And it'll be interesting to see if he pushes for a start as well. And that could be another spanner in the works for Tipp to deal with too. But in terms of the physical matchups, like, you know, like the Tipp backline in particular, you know, they'll really look forward to maybe taking on a Galway forward line that doesn't have as many big men as they did have in the past. You know, but like as Ciaran was saying there, like I think like Conor Whelan, just when he hits form, he's just so hard to stop. I think he's got 6 championship goals, but I know a couple of them might have come against Westmeath and Antrim, but like I thought in the Leinster final, he was just wonderful. Like he got 1-6. So, but like, you know, when they've so much to worry about there, and there's so much to worry about for both teams, especially in those matchups between the forwards and the backs at both ends of the pitch.
Yeah, it's going to be a war, Ciaran. Do you reckon that both for Clare and for Galway, that the hangover from losing a provincial final and losing it in fairly painful circumstances for both of them, is that going to be a hurdle for them? Because it certainly was for Clare last year.
It was, to be fair, but in fairness to Clare, up until that Munster final, you know, to me, they probably were the most consistent team. And I suppose their biggest challenge, and they did bounce after it, so their biggest challenge here, if Clare can manage to get a result, Shane, Saturday night, you know, then they throw themselves firmly back in the melting pot. You know, so Clare can be dangerous going forward. But the big one here is for Dublin. Dublin are capable of coming down now and putting on an almighty display in the Gaelic grounds, right? And they could blow them off the face of the earth. I wouldn't rule that out either. So it all depends, Shane, really. I suppose it all depends, you know, what mentality of Dublin come down. And as you rightly pointed out, how wounded are Clare still? Are they ready for this particular match? It'll come down to possibly something like that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very tasty game, Jason, because like Clare have such brilliant forwards, and I'm just looking at the match program from one of the games here, and I'm looking at Aidan McCarthy, Tony Kelly, Shane O'Donnell, Mark Rogers. You can add in David Fitzgerald onto the wing as well. And I look at the Dublin, I'm looking at a match program from a Dublin game here, and most of the strength lies in the backline. Now there is, of course, Donald Burke, Cian Sullivan, Cian Boland, Danny Sutcliffe, but it really is in the backs where they're at their best. Owen O'Donnell, Conor Burke, Paddy Smith, Dara Gray, Paddy Doyle, these sort of lads. So Dublin have to nullify that threat that Clare have, and they have such a threat in so many places.
Yeah, definitely, Shane. Like, you know, like Clare will still be licking their wins after that Munster final, as Ciaran said. Like, and you know, after they lost it last year, they just looked so sapped, didn't they? Like, you know, they just barely got through that Wexford game in Thurles, and then by the time they got to Croke Park to play Kilkenny, just the tank was absolutely empty. And then, like on the flip side of that, like Galway last year in the All-Ireland quarterfinals, you know, they were very lucky to get over Cork. Cork missed so much that day. But then, like, you know, they arrived at Croke Park to play Kilkenny, and you know, they put in a wonderful performance, and you know, Henry thought they were very unlucky to lose that game. So, like the hangover from a Munster final can be huge. Like, but if you get over a quarter final, it can you know, really spark things again by the time you get to Croke Park. But like, just when you look at that Dublin team, like just the likes of Liam Rush and Chris Crummy, and it's hard not to think about the players that aren't there. I know you said they're strong at the back, but imagine how much stronger they would be if they had Liam Rush and Cian O'Callaghan, for example. And it's just hard not to think about the lads that are missing as well. But like, as you said as well, that Clare attack when they had form, like, you know, Tony and Aidan McCarthy and and David Fitz on the wing. Like it's just so hard to stop them, and it's very hard to see how Dublin can keep them out.
The only thing there, Shane, the only thing that I will say that's probably a big positive from Clare, right? I suppose the last 6 or 7 minutes in the Munster final, I suppose that they're looking at the video analysis and they're also seeing that plenty of opportunities. Not only to draw it, but probably get it across the line. And then you had a bit of fiasco near the end of it. So they'll take solace out of that, to be fair, you know. They'll have to take solace out of that because they were that close. They were that close in beating Limerick. So if they come from that point of view, which I imagine they will, you know, I think they could be ready for it, right? But on the Dublin point of view, you know, Conor Burke, you know, Conor Burke now and Ciaran Joyce, the two of them to me are your modern centre back. They're kind of gliding left and gliding right effortlessly, and I suppose counteracting the space and the grass at their ease. So I'm mentioning young Burke because, you know, I think he's an outstanding centre back. No different to Rush was for about 10 years, you know. Rush, to be fair, was similar to Gerard McInerney and Dahi Burke. Anytime he went out, his performance level were 8 and 9 out of 10. But I just thought I'd mention that centre back for Dublin because he caught my eye this year, and, you know, he's a great bit of stuff. And obviously, if he comes and takes authority at centre back, he could have a major say too.
And Ciaran, do you think that would you know Brian Lohan? Because I'm just wondering, how would he have reacted the last couple of weeks to the criticism he got for putting in Cian Nolan and leaving him there for so long, and very tough on the young lad, you know. But Conor Cleary's still out, so obviously he still has to find a solution there. But would you know Brian Lohan, and like, is he the sort of person now who's going to be bull thick and just stick with what he did before, or how would he have taken that?
Yeah, I know him, and I know Sean Tracy pretty well as well. Sean Tracy was with me with the Limerick 21s a good number of years ago. An outstanding coach. Now, up until that point, I have to say Brian Lohan and Tracy would have got their tactics bang on nearly every day they went out. But I suppose this one is sticking out like a sore thumb. It was so obvious. And I suppose it went on and on and on. And, you know, and I'm a firm believer, you know, as a manager and a coach, irrespective of what is done prior to the match, you have to be at your best the day of the match. And I'd imagine he'd be man enough to say, right, okay, I possibly was a small bit slow on that. And if he's man enough to, I suppose, self-diagnose his own performance, because, you know, that's something that I always do myself as a player or as a manager. Is there anything more that I could have done? Could I acted that bit more sharper or quicker? So I think he's man enough, Shane, to do that and accept it within himself. And I suppose if he does that, that's probably the correct way to do it, rather than resist it and say, you know, Frank Sinatra, I'm right and I'm always right. You know what I mean? So I'd imagine he probably went down the road that probably acted a bit slow. And, you know, that can happen, Shane. That can happen in a Munster final, you know. It's a huge day, huge arena, loads at stake, huge roar. So that's why I said you have to be at your best. So if he comes to the point of view, yeah, possibly I was slightly slow, and move on and forget about it. There's only one way to put that right, Shane. That is to be twice as sharp the next day you go out as a manager.
Yeah, Jason, Micheál Donoghue's going to be licking his lips though at the issue that that Brian Lohan has at full back, because there isn't an obvious person to slot in there. And we saw against Galway that he put Donald Burke in full forward at times, and that created a big problem for Galway that day. I wonder, is he going to put Donald Burke in there again and just, you know, ask Clare how are you going to deal with him?
Yeah, it could definitely happen, Shane. Like, you know, Micheál, I definitely think he'll want to kind of pull something from a bit left field here to throw his banner in the works, because like it's a do or die game, and, you know, it's last chance saloon for them. So he'll definitely be looking to do something like that. Like, and just kind of what Ciaran was saying there about Brian as well, you know, like he did react after the Tipp game when he put Ivor Quilligan back in goals for the Limerick game in the Gaelic rounds. Like, so he did address that mistake kind of fairly sharpish, and even though it's ruthless and it was probably very hard for Eamon Footy, the goalkeeper, to kind of get over that, like, Brian knew that change had to be made. So maybe this is just maybe another slight case of that with their defence, but you know, definitely that full back line can be got at, like, and it'll be very interesting to see what Dublin can throw at them there. And like, Micheál's no mug either. You know, what he's done with Dublin already in this first season has been remarkable. He's a very shrewd manager. He's a great tactical thinker, and like, I definitely think he'll produce a few aces from the pack to cause Clare plenty of problems. And that area is definitely one where he can make a bit of hay if they get things right.
And
Yeah,
Ciaran,
and Shane O'Mahony did quite well when he came on, to be fair. And you've Paul Flanagan. And I suppose I could be wrong here now, but, my view would be now of 2, 3, and 4. Each of those guys needs to have the ability to play in 2, 4, or 3. This is the modern game. 5, 6, 7. Each of those need to be as comfortable on that line as well. And I suppose Clare probably aren't that comfortable in those areas yet.
And like I would imagine that ultimately what will cost Dublin is what's cost them before in qualifiers against the likes of Cork, that little bit of pace around the pitch. And Ryan Taylor, he always has a big say in these games, like his pace running up through the centre, David Burke, Tony Kelly, Aidan McCarthy. Ultimately, I think that's going to cost Dublin. And to be fair, Mark Rogan and Chris O'Leary have come into midfield. They've done quite well. There are other players that we've mentioned already that are very good players. But Ciaran, I think ultimately that pace and drive and athleticism of Clare might be the difference.
Without a doubt, because, Clare are lethal up front, Shane, to be fair. And in Conlon, in fairness, since he went back centre-back, anytime he's on the ball, he is very strong. He always wins his own ball, always gets frees, and is a very, very commanding figure for him, because when he's going well as Tony Kelly, Clare are going well. But ultimately, Shane, Dublin, to me, as I said, I don't want to sound like a scratch record. When they come to the party, they can look as good as anyone. Because I thought their display against Galway this year in the first round was awesome. And if they can get a bit more consistency, and I suppose mentally strong and mentally tough, they're there with a great chance. But Shane, that's all in it. It's like the old cliche, on their day. And, you could say on your day about any team. But, if you want to be serious contenders, on your day, it needs to be about 6 or 7 in a row.
And do you think that the venue makes much of a difference here for any of the 4 teams, really, Jason? Because Dublin are the one team that are probably least used to this venue, especially when it has 40,000 people in it.
Yeah, I was just gonna raise that point as well. Like a massive championship game at the Gaelic grounds. It's been second home for Clare over the last couple of seasons. They've played so many massive games there. So Dublin are going into the unknown a wee bit in that regard, and the place is going to be absolutely wedged from an hour before the start of that game, because you'd imagine that a lot of the Tipp and Galway ones will come down early and want to go in and get a look at that as well. So I think it's like Dublin going to an away game in a Munster championship that they don't play in. So I think that'll definitely be worth a few scores for Clare for sure, after the 2 grueling games they played there already this summer in the championship, and having beaten Limerick there in the first round, and maybe still thinking about the ifs and buts in the Munster final. Okay,
delighted to say we're joined by, well, I suppose at this stage, former Antrim hurler Neil McManus. It must be strange to even hear that, Neil.
It is a little bit all right, but as you're all good things have to come to an end, Shane. Thanks for having me, by the way.
I'd say your phone has been hopping in the last day or two since it was announced.
It has been lovely. Now, hearing from lads that you hurled against and maybe haven't seen for quite a period of time, maybe at this stage when you're playing as long as I was. But that's great now, and nice memories to look back on.
Yeah, because I was thinking that when you played against Kilkenny this year in the Leinster Championship and you had to limp off, I was thinking, is that going to be perhaps your final game? Because, obviously Father Time is undefeated. So you're going to have to retire at some stage. And I was thinking, was there a threat that could have been your last game when you were limping off?
I thought it was. Now, to be honest, obviously it was a grade 3C hamstring tear. Not that I'm overly technical or overly knowledgeable in that space, but I was pretty much told that was you're done, lad. But I was very lucky now to get back. It's usually about 12 weeks or so, and I ended up being back 3 weeks later to play against Westmeath, which, maybe what people would think was our least glamorous tie in the Leinster Championship. It was a hugely important game for us, and I think even the performance that day was a much truer reflection of where that group of Antrim hurlers are at the minute.
And you feel like, now that you're done, you've done what players generally say, which is leave the jersey in a better place. I presume you're very content with your innings with Antrim.
Yes and no, Shane, to be totally honest. I was, part of a very strong minor team when I was 16, 17, and then coming into senior, we were so competitive as a minor group that I thought we would be the same at senior, and it wasn't the case. It was very fleeting that we were really competitive at the top table, and I I was really hoping that would be the case for much longer periods of my career, but it wasn't to be. And we were strong at certain periods, especially 2009, 2010, 2011. We were really strong, and then for the last couple of seasons we were competitive again. But there was a long period in the middle where we weren't very competitive, and those years were disappointing, to be totally honest.
Okay, I'm not sure if Jason and Ciaran want to jump in and throw in a tuppence worth, lads.
Yeah, Neil, how's things, Jason Byrne here? I was talking to Sambo about you yesterday for a piece, and this is what he said. He said, making a good hurler is like baking a cake. You need all the ingredients. You need desire, you need skill, and you need a level of toughness. He had all the ingredients, and there was always very little lacking in him as a player. Just like in terms of when you were coming up first through the club, like what was it like to have a role model like him? And even though he's singing your praises there, how much of an inspiration was he to you? Because he's such a figure in Antrim hurling.
Oh, he was massive, huge personality. Drove standards just of excellence, really, and working hard was the bedrock of everything that he taught us. Obviously, myself and his son Shane have grown up in each other's pockets, and I'd say that was a bigger challenge, was looking after us than maybe trying to teach us how to hurl. And he's using the ingredients. One there, he fancies himself as a bit of a cook, so he does, Sambo. So he'll be happy with that. But he's been an unbelievable asset to our community in Cushendall and to Antrim hurling for such a period of time. He's continuing to give, and like everybody knows his story and the adversities that he overcame personally to be the man that he is and to be so successful in business and in hurling. But something that's rarely touched upon is his coaching ability, and there's very few people from the north who are invited to the successful counties in the south to speak to teams and to take training sessions. And like Ciaran, you probably know him very, very well. He's so enthusiastic, so knowledgeable about the game, so passionate that he gets a rise out of whatever group of players he's working with still to this day. He's a phenomenal man to be a friend of, to be honest.
Congratulations, Neil, number one. And I suppose, and I liked your answer to Shane, there's always unfinished business in some shape or some form, whether that's a club or a county. But, when I think of Samba, I think of Kieran Barr as well, So you are going to be mentioned in their company also. And I suppose what I really liked about your career, really, and it's probably the biggest test really for any inter-county hurler or football, when you're wearing or privileged to have an inter-county jersey for 10, 11 or 12, 13 years. And, when we're put out to grass and we can look back at our career and we could say, do you know what, now for the 12 or 13 years, I was pretty consistent, whatever about the medals and cups. And you'll fall into that category. And at times, believe it or not, that is probably more important than 2 or 3 All-Ireland medals if you were consistent year for about 10 years. So well done. Congratulations, and enjoy your retirement, man. All right?
Thank you, Ciaran. Appreciate it very much.
Neil, just to ask you then about another player who's going to continue playing, and this is something I'll bring in the other lads in a minute. Patrick Horgan is determined to play on for a 17th season next year. I mean, he's a fair detail, isn't he? And he's obviously playing as well as ever.
Oh, he's incredible. A few messages back and forth with him late last night and this morning. He is just something else. Even the way he's moving, I believe he was Cork's best player in the championship, certainly best forward. No, Kieran Joyce has been incredible for them of late. But he's just been one of the best players in Ireland now for probably a dozen years. And he so rarely lets Cork down. A season that they wouldn't be overly happy with last year was missing him, and he's such a key component of that team because whenever you lose, like using the Galway example, whenever you lose a Joe Canning, it's so hard to replace him because he's your go-to. Even in his last game against Waterford, whenever they were trying to find the answers to unpick the lock in that game, the last 2 puck-outs go down the top of Joe Canning. He wins and he creates the goal for Flynn and he scores a point from play. Those people aren't growing in trees no matter what county you're from. And Patrick Horgan is still moving so well. Like the runs he's making, during games, the way he's able to open up defences, and he sees not only obviously an incredible eye for a score and the hands of our Lord, he is able to see that killer pass that people don't think's on until he's played it. And there's very few people in the country that have that genuinely. Maybe Jason Ford or Tipp and Cian Lynch with Limerick, but those people are just not growing on trees.
Ciaran, he has another season in him for sure.
Oh, Shane, without a doubt, I was delighted when I heard the news, and, no different to Neil. He was a different player this year. And, outside of his consistency, he's the one player that I can see that probably tries to talk to the ball, cuts it, twists it, spins it, and hooks it. But I suppose, Pat Mulcahy and his backroom team have a huge part to play in this. Because, as Niall said, he's hurling this year with so much freedom and at ease. And obviously, Shane, when you watch a player doing that, he's a happy camper on the field and he's a happy camper off the field. So that just didn't happen himself. They obviously hooked in on him. They wanted to hold on to him. It's very easy to say, hold on for another year or two. You'll be a huge influence around the squad. That's fine, but Patrick Horgan does a lot more than him being a huge influence on the squad. He still has a huge influence on the field, Shane. He's proven that this year. 36, he looks after himself extremely well. Shane, I played with Patrick Swell seniors at 43 years of age. So a fella can play inter-county hurling at 35, at 36, if you're minding yourself as well as you do on the field, off the field. And obviously, Horgan is meticulous at that. And he to be fair, he's reinvented himself this year, Shane. That's the way I'd say it. So I'm delighted to see him stand on for the year. But I suppose there's a lot of cornerbacks in the country that might be kind of thinking the same what I'm thinking.
And we've all had our say on the matches this weekend. Neil, just I know because you can't stay on long there. What are your thoughts on the Tipperary Galway game and the Clare Dublin game?
Toss of a coin. Tipp Galway. I still think that Galway's Achilles heel, what remains to be their Achilles heel is their inconsistency. You see them one day and they're brilliant, and the next day they don't seem to bring that same level of intensity. But Tipp have been great. Tipp were the form team of the league. They had some huge performances in the Munster Championship as well. Even though, at one stage during the final round of games, I was thinking they could possibly go out here if there's a draw in the other game. And I fancy Tipp just about to do that. And look, I'm going down. I'm looking forward to the games. And then Dublin are an underestimated side. Now, I know that we're all totally sure that Clare are contenders for the All-Ireland. But if it was set up for anybody, it's set up for Dublin. Just coming in under the radar, even not with an overly emphatic victory in the preliminary quarter-final either, truth be told. But you have to go for Clare. But it is set up for Dublin to have a real cut off them. But I think Clare are just moving too well. That front six are exceptional for Clare. They're as good as anything in the country, and they've not only proven it in 2 consecutive Munster finals, they've proven it in nearly all their group games as well. Their level of consistency of performance has been just incredible. But the one thing, at the back, we seen in the semi-final last year against Kilkenny when John Conlon couldn't start and he was forced to go into the stand just before the start of the game. They weren't replacing like at the back now, in truth. But so it would be interesting to see how they would deal with an injury at the back, because that half-back line's been monumental for them so far this season.
Yeah, for sure. And who's your kind of All-Ireland favourite from here, Neil? Because Declan Hannon, there's that injury. Sean Finn, there's that injury. And Cian Lynch, we don't know how fit he's going to be for the semi-final. And Ciaran isn't going to tell us. So we won't get any light shed on that. So who's your favourite, Neil?
The favourites are Limerick. There can't be any other favourite in the country. There's 5 in a row Munster champions. But at the same time, anybody can be beat on any given day, and Limerick are more than aware of that. But they have the squad, and I think that they're capable of losing a big player or two. Now, it will be a test without Declan, that's for sure, because he is He's a vital part of the cog. He's a vital cog in that wheel, I should say. And with Sean Finn already missing, it will stretch him a little bit more. But we've seen so many different players through the league who haven't seen in the championship yet so far. They do have options to fill that void, options that no other county have the luxury of, in my opinion. But I would have a sneaking suspicion that Kilkenny will be thereabouts again. They don't know when they're beat. They proved it again in the Leinster final. They've done 4 Leinsters in a row as well, with supposedly a weaker Kilkenny team than we've seen over the past decade. So Owen Cody really come to the fore for them as well. I think he's just an incredible bit of stuff. So I would keep a watchful eye on Kilkenny if I was Limerick as well.
Yeah, and I suppose just before we finish up the hurling, Ciaran, who's going to replace Declan Hannon in the semi-final?
Well, I suppose if you look at all the other matches, Shane, they have a lot of options, really, But my gut feeling tells me they probably slap Kyle Hayes in there and young Coughlin could come in. I don't know. As Neil said, they have a lot of options, but I suppose it's a matter of nailing the right one. For me, I'd probably just move Hayes in and probably bring young Coughlin in. They could bring Dan Morris out. You don't know. They have a lot of options in, I suppose, and whatever they're doing and training and implementing, they will come up, Shane, with the correct formula. And, I can't see that really derailing them. I suppose the big one for me, and I look at Limerick, Shane, really, no other county really has grabbed the bull by the horns when Limerick are after kind of underperforming so many games. So they're still sitting in a great position. They're probably only going 50%, and they're still bang smack in the middle of it. Would I be similar to Niall? I watched Kilkenny last year. I fancied him to go all the way to the final, and actually my train of thought is even stronger this year. And if I had to pick another panel outside of Limerick that might have the same level of strength in the bench, it probably would be Kilkenny.
Okay, so just in a word, as we finish up the hurling, Jason, who's going to win the 2 games this weekend?
I would have to go for Clare and Tipp.
Ciaran?
Yeah, I'm similar enough, but having said that, Galway could beat all 3 on their day, but they don't do it enough. Do you know what I mean? So I'm sticking to Tipp and Clare too, man.
Neil?
I'll go with the lads. Tipp and Clare, they're the favourites, but Galway are more than capable of surprise.
Dublin, yeah.
Yeah, okay, well look lads, brilliant. Thanks very much, Neil, for coming on. I know you're in the middle of meetings and stuff, and congrats on a great career.
Well done, Neil.
Thank you, man. Cheers to joining us.
Well done, Neil. Good man.
Okay, so brilliant to have him. And Ciaran, we'll of course chat to you next week. Thanks very much as always.
Okay, all the best, lads. Bye.
All the best, Ciaran. Good man.
Delighted to say we're joined now by John O'Mahony, who of course has plenty of inter-county experience. John, how are you this morning?
Good, Shane. Yeah, looking forward to a big weekend of football knockouts, which will bring a new dynamic to the whole scene this weekend. So it'll be there's some tasty fixtures ahead. Yeah,
and I mean I presume you expected Galway versus Mayo to come out of the draw. Everyone was thinking, of course, it's going to come out.
Yeah, I mean, once Sunday evening, I was exhausted by 6 o'clock Sunday evening watching all the various games and the way that I suppose teams collapsed that were expected to win. Especially I suppose in Mayo's case, they were 6 points ahead. I was watching it on GA Go. I couldn't be there. But when I saw them 6 points ahead, I said, that's done. I went in to watch in another room, watch Roscommon and Kildare, because that was a tasty encounter. And came out 6 or 7 minutes later just to have a look that everything was okay. And the whole house had fallen in. So, I suppose overall, when you look at it, the teams that were playing for their lives last weekend, Armagh, Donegal, Kildare and Westmeath, sometimes character is shown when your back is to the wall. And the other teams played with those teams under pressure played with gay abandon. It was a knockout for them, I suppose, last Sunday. And that kind of gives us an indication of what this week is going to look like. But I mean, over the years, I have been a big believer in you can have all the tactics, the fitness, the talent you want, But if you haven't your mental attitude right, you'll get caught. And that's what happened Roscommon, that's what happened Mayo, that's what happened Galway, and that's what happened Monaghan probably on Saturday evening last as well. And now are we into a situation this weekend where, you know, maybe Cork, Kildare, Donegal will think that they have it all, and the other team that played poorly last week as well, will they think that they have it all solved? And will be a flip in the mental attitude? So will Roscommon go down with their backs to the wall to Cork, for instance, and maybe turn them over because Cork think they have it all solved? And same with maybe Kildare. So it is an intriguing week, but I think the mental attitude of teams this weekend and throwing in the dynamic of the knockout is going to be absolutely everyone bearing their souls, because, you know, there wasn't as much by the teams that were playing for their lives last week. There wasn't as much, you know, slow process and passing across the field. They were throwing the kitchen sink at it, and it benefited the watching of it to an extent in all those games where the upsets took place.
Yeah, Jason, just to bring you back in then. The drama was unbelievable. Like, John Heslin had a last minute free, Shane Walsh had a last minute free, Aidan O'Shea dropped the ball in. If you put it over the bar, they would have finished second and had a home draw. Kevin Feely, of course, had that last minute mark and put it over the bar. Like, this was sort of last day of the Premier League type drama, and we'll probably get more of the same this weekend.
Yeah, definitely, Shane. I was in Carrick on Shannon, and it was gas. Like, Colin Boyle and Curtis Staunton were both there on media duties, and they were running over the laptop, seeing what was happening in the Mayo game and kind of panicking, and it was mad. Like it turned out all four Connacht teams were beaten, and, you know, if you'd have said that to someone on Sunday morning, they would have said you were daft. Like, and just the whole the results that came in were just so against the head. Like, and you know, I was at the Galway Armagh game, and even though there was only 6,000 there, and they were looking to move the game to Croke Park, like the way Carrick is, like, I don't need to remind Jono, like, it's just this tight wee ground, like, and it felt like there was so many more people there, like, and, you know, when Shane Walsh missed the free at the end, and it was such, you could tell how much it meant to Armagh, like, you know, they were just, the celebrations at the end were just remarkable, like, because out of nowhere they topped the group, and Mayo will be really kicking themselves, because I think themselves and Derry were the only team going into the weekend that had 2 victories under their belts, and just finishing top was totally in their own hands, and that result was probably the biggest shock of the weekend for me, that Cork turned them over. And as Jono said, like, if you don't have your mindset right, it can definitely cost you. Like, so it's gas. Like, we were talking about Galway and Mayo as All-Ireland contenders, and now one of them is going to be gone this weekend. Like, it's going to be, I can't wait to go to Salthill on Sunday. I presume you'll be there as well, John. You know, the place is going to be heaving, and it's so hard.
It is. I think someone says this morning that there's 20,000 tickets sold already, so it will be a sellout. There's no doubt about that. It's very intriguing, because here you have a kind of a different mix. You have 2 teams who didn't perform last week. You have Galway, who got caught because, you know, they had a safety net, because everyone expected Westmeath to be beaten by Tyrone, and that even if Galway had lost to Armagh and Tyrone had won, then Galway would have still topped the group, because on the head-to-head with Tyrone they'd be there. So I mean, the safety net, and probably, you know, they probably took Armagh because they had beaten them last year, and also that Rian O'Neill was injured, and all of that they took it a little. And up to now, really, Galway had been doing their business quietly, beating Tyrone and putting Westmeath away eventually without being spectacular. But it absolutely, as I said, I think the fact that Armagh were playing for their life, there was a different attitude. You could see it on the field. And, you know, it's incredible, because Armagh have been underperforming all year in many respects, and didn't shut out games at the end and so on. So they were a different animal the last day, whereas Galway showed something, I suppose, frailties that they hadn't shown all year. You know, they just didn't get the business done. And Shane Walsh, you'd have put your house on him maybe to get the equaliser, which would have been enough. but because I know it was out on the wing, but when we saw what he could do last year in the All-Ireland final, you'd have backed him to do it, but it didn't happen, and now they find themselves. I mean, in many respects, people in Connacht, Mayo, and Galway were saying, "Well, God, Mayo and Galway could meet in All-Ireland semi-final or final or whatever." Well, that certainly went out the window, and now it's death for one team, and even the team that wins, be that whether that's Galway or Mayo, they face an incredible. They have Dublin, Kerry, Derry, or Armagh, and where Armagh are sitting pretty. I mean, the odds you'd have got on Armagh to top the group last Sunday morning, I presume you'd have got about 100 to 1. So I suppose it adds to the drama. It adds to the drama of the championship, definitely. But it also brings up this thing about, whether things are decided on head-to-head or scoring difference, because Galway had a superior scoring difference to Armagh and so on. So there's a lot to be talked about but I suppose that's for later about the system. But it certainly is intriguing, and I'm looking forward to this shootout at OK Corral on Sunday, because obviously being from Mayo, can they recover? Their collapse was probably bigger than Galway's. So can they recover, or can Galway? They have the injury thing hanging over them with Dylan McHugh and Damien Comer and Sean Kelly, who look, if you were to judge on the visuals last Sunday, it looks like he'll find it difficult to make it, but I have no idea. Sometimes miracles can be worked when your back are to the wall.
Yeah, and Billy Joe Padden said in the Mayo News, "It's been a long time since I was so annoyed by watching Mayo. Considering where we're at in the season, I thought the display against Cork was absolutely atrocious from start to finish." Jason, it's going to be a tough week for Kevin McStay, as it will for Pádraig Joyce, because Galway lacked that bit of composure. You don't want to throw too much at the feet of Shane Walsh, but it was surprising to see him miss a penalty. It was surprising to see him put that late shot so far wide. A couple of other players, like Peter Cook, had wild shots that didn't even go wide late on in the game. So both teams lacked that bit of composure.
Yeah, definitely. And just Shane looked way off colour. I don't know, is he tired or is he just mentally taxed from the year he had with, going so long with Kilmacud and Crooks and all the saga with the transfer last year and everything? I'm sure it had a big impact on him. I know he took a bit of a break, but he just doesn't look like he's at the level where he was at last year. If they're missing Damien Comer on Sunday, it's such a massive blow, as John said. He's got a hamstring injury. Dylan McHugh's got a hamstring injury. Sean Kelly left Park Sean in a protective boot for his ankle, and he was using crutches. Now, as John said, we don't know the extent of the damage, but there'll be the rosary beads will be out to make sure he's on the field, because he was absolutely outstanding on Sunday. His runs from deep in terms of breaking the lines and making things happen. He got another brilliant goal. He got a great goal against Mayo in the league earlier this year as well. And this is the game that didn't happen in the Connacht Championship that everyone thought would happen. And those injuries are going to be vital for Galway, and for Mayo as well. Cillian O'Connor was playing with his club last weekend. We've been told all summer he's kind of on the way back, so it'll be interesting to see if he features in the 26, just to give them that extra bit as well. Matthew Tierney's been outstanding for Galway, in fairness. I thought he was great again last weekend. Cook had a great first half before they started taking those kind of wild shots and things like that as well. John Maher's been a real find at midfield as well, I think, for Galway. I think he's been absolutely exceptional, and they still have a few of the lads still playing from last year as well, like Killian McDade, and having Ian Burke back's been massive. But I was surprised he was left on the field for so long on Sunday as well, because his impact definitely wasn't what he would have hoped. So it's going to be, both teams need to make big statements this weekend, and it's do or die. And it's mad when you look at the stats, for all the times they played each other in the championship, it's so even. And Jono would have been involved in so many of those games as well. I think from all the times they've met, I think Mayo have won 44 times and Galway have won 42, and there's been 6 draws or something. So margins are just so small between these two counties. It has to be the best rivalry in football. If you look at through the entire history of the GA, it has to be the best rivalry, because it's always just been so close.
And John, do you see any areas as been particularly crucial, any matchups that one team can get an edge on?
Well, I think that like if you talk about Mayo first, I think they were penetrated too easy. Like in the last few minutes, the last 15 minutes after Cork got the goal last from the penalty, the Mayo central of their defence was opened up time and time again. So, what's going to be send a signal here is I'd expect there'd be a fair few changes in both teams from last week. In Galway's case, you had Billy Mannion, who I don't think he played many minutes since coming on making his debut for Galway against Armagh in last year's game. So I think there will be changes. The matchups will be incredible. I mean, if Damien Comer, and perhaps, I mean, he was supposed to have a tight hamstring. That's why he didn't start against Westmeath, but he came on in the last 10 or 15 minutes and he got 3 points from play and he was decisive in everything he did. So I wonder, were they minding him last week maybe or whatever? I'm not sure. But if he plays, then, the matchups who will Mayo put to mark him, or will he be double marked or whatever? That'll be a big one. I'd expect to be changes in Galway as well, because John Maher, I know him from my club at Baltill. I mean, he has an engine that would go forever, and he has been very, very good in all the games that in the league, at the latter end of the league, and in the championship games that he's played. So, you'd expect that he'd be pushing for a place as well. So the matchups, because we don't know exactly who's going to be playing or what changes are going to be made, it's going to be difficult. But if Comer is playing the matchup there, whoever is marking, it could be clubmate from my own here in Balladream, David McBrien, who has done well there. But it's you'd have to say that the whole dynamic of the game would change if Comer played, and also Aidan O'Shea has been doing very well inside this year, so he'll be a big matchup for whoever is taking him from the Galway side. I mean, if Sean Kelly is out, I know Sean Mulcairns has been injured for a year and but has played very little football. But he's a natural full back as well. So I suppose the first thing that before you can even talk about matchups, we'll have to see what kind of teams are announced. But it's definitely going to be an intriguing, as has been said there. Shane said about Shane Walsh. I mean, he looks to have been totally distracted since the highs of last year All-Ireland. So he needs to focus and get his eye in. If he does, it'll be a totally different game. For Mayo, I suppose the big one for Galway with matchups with Mayo. I mean, Ryan O'Donoghue has been fantastic for Mayo over the last number of years, and who'll be picking him up because he's the reason that Mayo got to probably won the league a few years ago and got to the league final and won the league this year. So there's a lot for, as you said earlier, for Kevin McStay and Pádraig Joyce to be contemplating as we speak.
And Jason, then Donegal, your own Donegal against Tyrone, know each other well. Were you disgusted when you saw Tyrone come out, or did it fire you up?
I was disgusted initially because my mum's from Tyrone and I'm kind of sick listening to her when all these games come around. But I'd say, finishing second was a brilliant achievement for Donegal, given where they came from, getting relegated in the league. They hadn't won a game before the Clare game. They hadn't won a game since they beat Kerry in that 30-day in Balbafay in the very first round of the league. So things were just on the floor so much between Paddy Carr leaving as manager and different players being missing, and Michael Murphy's retirement just leaving that shadow over a senior dressing room as it would with any team. But they went down to Clare, and after a very disappointing first half, they dug out a serious result down there. And I was at the Derry game, and bar just switching off for a couple of goals with runners coming from deep, they were right in that game. Oisín Gallen was just on fire. Just masterclass performance from him. But to do the business against Monaghan was massive for this group in terms of confidence, and I think that will just be vital for them. Like as Jono touched on there, the mindset and where you're at is just brings so much to your game. And the day against Monaghan, it looked like they'd really turned the corner. Paddy McBurtie's coming back from injury just at the right time. It'll be so interesting to see if he starts, because he's come off the bench twice now in the last 2 games to get vital minutes into him. Jamie Brennan was brilliant against Monaghan after maybe a disappointing day against Derry. Gallen produced the goods again. Kieran Thompson was excellent. Sean Patton was brilliant at the back. There's so many things to be positive about now all of a sudden when everything seems so grim. Brendan McCall's been wonderful at fullback when we thought Neil McGee would never be replaced. So, and I have to mention my own 2 club mates, Owen Van Gallagher and Hugh McFadden, who've been real leaders as joint captains since Murphy retired and since McBurtie was sidelined with injury too. They've been real leaders on the field for the county as well. So, I'd say a bit of them were kind of cursing their luck after finishing second. They might have hoped for a better draw, but Tyrone coming to Balbafay, if they can't get motivated for that, I don't know. It's if they really want redemption now, getting a result here would just be massive, because I think the group are in bonus territory. They've nothing to lose now after such a disappointing league, and losing to Down and Ulster, to come through that group in second place was brilliant for this group. And given the amount of young players that are coming through as well, I was just really, really happy for them, because I know firsthand the pressure that they've been under and the cloud that's been hanging over the county, and that's been lifted now in a big way since beating Monaghan especially. So they've nothing to lose this weekend, and it wouldn't surprise me if they ground out a result, because they have a great record against Tyrone and Balbafay by that Super 8s game in 2018 or 2019, I think. So why not?
What do you think, John?
If I could come in there, I think that the job that Aidan O'Rourke and Paddy Bradley have done, and obviously the players with the backing and the way that McBurtie spoke after the game the last day about, all the flack and the noise that was outside and that to shut themselves away from it. I think it's, okay, you could argue that Kildare or Cork, they're the turnaround of the year, but I think Donegal, because they had the added dimension of, if you like, the chaos about their development squads and all of the people resigning there and all of that going on as well. And really, I think the whole world, you'd have to admire what has happened there from obviously the tightness of the group. I mean, they lost their manager, Paddy Carr, during the season. Everything that could happen and go wrong, it was like Murphy's Law for 6 months, and now they're at the stage. So I think that's I'd be expecting Donegal to beat Tyrone, because there's just something not right with Tyrone, what that is, or because they have some magnificent footballers. And I know the dynamic of the Ulster rivalry between Donegal and Tyrone will come in, and maybe that will ignite Tyrone. But on the face of it, I just feel that Donegal have done magnificently, and they're, as the cliche goes, their mojo is back in full tilt. So they're in a very good place at the minute.
Yeah, geez, if they can make a burst from here, that'll be some turnaround for Donegal this season. Kildare against Monaghan, were you impressed last week with Kildare's performance and victory over Roscommon, John? And they'll feel they can beat Monaghan here, surely.
Well, yes, and I think, you see, maybe I'm falling into the trap of, that Kildare were so focused because they were playing for their lives last week, and Monaghan maybe felt that they had done very well up to that. They had been playing well. Was it Drew Derry and all of that, but or somebody anyway that good results. But I know Anne-Marie Kennedy, who's the team psychologist with Kildare. So Glenn Ryan can take a bow, and all the backroom team there as well, and they're at home. So now the great thing about Monaghan, the survivors in Division 1 of the National League, when you least expected, they'll play until the death, absolutely until the death. But I suppose you'd worry about, maybe that they're an aging team in some respects, and, Conor McManus has been such a servant, but he seems to be just a bit part now. player and so on. So I would fancy, based on the evidence of what we saw from Kildare last Sunday, I think Kildare maybe have it, and they're at home. We're home now with Tullamore rather than Newbridge. So they're going in a great frame of mind. But then Monaghan have often thrown the form book in people's faces before when they most needed it. And Vinnie Corey has steered his team to this stage, and I think that's the most difficult one of this week's fixtures to predict. But maybe Kildare have a slight edge there.
What do you think, Jason?
A very hard one to call. As John said, you have to hand it to Kildare. Like, they went into that game against Roscommon, and they hadn't won a game since they beat Wicklow and Leinster. Like, and they'd lost to Dublin twice in between, and they took Dublin down to Kilkenny, and it didn't work out for them that day at all. Like, but like to beat Roscommon, I know Roscommon had 12 wides, but like you have to give full credit to Kildare as well. The way they ground out that result, totally against the head. Paddy Woodgate's been brilliant for them. He's got 111 in this championship so far, and when they get motoring, as an attacking force, they've been really good. Like, and Glenn Ryan's been waiting for this statement. Him and his dream backroom team, they've been waiting for this big championship statement, and that was definitely it. So again, they have nothing to lose. It's a pity there's no Newbridge or nowhere. It's a pity it's being redeveloped, because if that game was on in there as opposed to Tullamore, it would definitely be worth 4 or 5 points to them alone. But like Monaghan again, they are the great survivors. You can never write them off. They've been in Division 1 of the league for so long now, after circling the sinkhole and relegation for so long, and they had a great one against Tyrone and Ulster, and like it kind of blew up on their faces against Derry after that, and they'll be really, really disappointed with their performance against Donegal last week in Omagh, which has usually been a very happy hunting ground for them. So it is the hardest one to call. It's like, but there's something about this Monaghan team, maybe just a wee bit more acuteness about them and a wee bit more experience with McManus and Jack McCarran, and on paper, like with Conor McCarthy in there as well, they probably have a wee bit more up front. And of course, Rory Beggan is just such an orchestrator for them. He's such a massive influence in their games, and I think the dynamic that he brings to them could be the difference.
Big game experience, maybe. Cork Roscommon, I reckon, will be pretty tight, John. Like, after the game last weekend, Davy Burke said, "Have they gone soft to me?" Like, we love Davy Burke around here. He did a podcast for us last year throughout the summer. Like, just dynamic character. So he calls it as he sees it. Can they turn it around in a week?
Well, that's the question. I mean, if anyone, I said last October, whenever Davy Burke was appointed, because I know his history, I said he was a very good choice by Roscommon. I know they found it took time or found it difficult maybe to make an appointment, but they made a very good one in Davy Burke, and he has squeezed a lot more out of Roscommon than many people expected up to now, like beating Mayo in the championship and drawing with Dublin. But then to what happened last week, he won't be happy with that. So there'll be paint stripping off walls, I'd say, during the week in Roscommon. But Cork are a very experienced team, like, Brian Hurley and Sean Powter and, Ian Maguire and these fellas, and probably John Cleary he knows probably after last week's game, he probably knows his best starting 15. I mean, Sean Sherlock's into it 1-5. I'd be amazed if he didn't start on Sunday. They're at home, and Roscommon will definitely turn it around. And there's a bit like Monaghan about Roscommon over the years, and I know them very well, is that they may not win All-Irelands or win big titles, but they'll always make it difficult for somebody else. So I do expect them to turn around their attitude and their accuracy. But with Cork being at home and having, again, the humiliation that Cork have gone through and Cork football have gone through, even within their own county, because the hurlers always kind of have the big draw in Cork. I would say, even looking at last week's game, when the Mayo lads came out on the field, like, there was adoration, because of the 9,000, I'd say 8,000 of it was Mayo supporters, and you had a few hundred from Cork, or maybe 1,000. So it'll be interesting to see if with Cork hurlers out now. It'll be interesting to see if the Cork public will come out and support the Cork team for what they did last week. But certainly, you'd have to. I'd fancy them. I'm a Connacht man, and I suppose you'd love to see Roscommon kind of keeping the Connacht flag up, because Connacht took an awful buffeting last weekend. But I still have a niggling feeling that Cork, now that they're in this position and they have an old advocate or player of my own, Kevin Walsh, with them along with John Cleary, and he knows Roscommon intimately as well. So effectively, I'd give Cork maybe a slight edge, but I think Cork will turn it around. So it will be an exciting game. But if you're asking me to put my head on the block, and I would have to say possibly Cork, but narrowly.
Yeah, what do you think, Jason?
Very hard one to call. I think the midfield battle here is going to be massive between Enda Smith and Ian Maguire. Two absolute giants who've just been brilliant for their counties and have just been key factors in everything that they've done in the last few years. Roscommon will probably need to go a bit more attacking to kind of match what Cork bring to them. I know that day against Mayo in particular, like, they were very shrewd and kind of keeping men behind the ball and trying to wear Mayo down and try and play keep ball, and they were vilified for doing that against Dublin and Croke Park, and it worked, and they were very annoyed that they didn't win that game either. So, the approach is going to be very interesting in terms of what they go with. But like in Ciaran and Jeremy Murtagh up front, they've so much armoury, and Conor Cox has been drifted in off the bench as well. Now he's chipped in with a few scores, and I'm sure as a Kerry man, he'd love to come on at Páirc Uí Chaoimh and try and hurt Cork as much as he can as well. But the lift that beating Mayo will give Cork will be just absolutely massive. And as Jono said, home advantage is going to be huge here as well. And like the impact, as Jono mentioned as well, that coaches have had in different counties has been fascinating. Kevin Walsh going to Cork was a very shrewd addition, as has Cian O'Neill going to Galway. And you have Mark McHugh in with Roscommon, who brings his kind of football know-how from Donegal as well. And you look at the dream team that Kildare have there in the line, and the coaches are driving where a lot of teams are going at the minute. So the fact that the two kind of significant coaches, and Kevin Walsh and maybe an up-and-coming coach and Mark McHugh, are going to be in the line at that game as well, is going to add a very interesting dynamic. And I know, Jono, you've got a couple of good up-and-coming coaches with you in Salt and Knocknacarra as well. After reaching the county final last year, he's got Finian Hanley and Sean Armstrong in his backroom team. So
yes, I'd agree with you there, and there's Ciaran there as well. He's coached Galway minor teams and Norman Costello. So yeah, I'd expect some of those guys to be in years to come to be on the sideline for Galway at some stage.
And the Tailteann Cup semi-finals this weekend, Downleash, Meath against Antrim. For Andy McEntee to be one season later, having been in charge of Meath for 6 years, to be coming up against his former players, it ended a bit acrimoniously. It brings a little bit of spice here, John. You would expect Meath to win, but it definitely brings spice.
Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't make it up, to be honest, and it's great for the Tailteann Cup, but I suppose, and Andy McEntee, his Antrim's performance in the league was probably disappointing. The consistency wasn't there, but certainly they seem to have turned that around. But so has Colm O'Rourke turned around his Meath charges in a very calm, and I suppose took the pressure off the young lads that he had and brought in a lot by his calmness to, he didn't make a big fuss about the fact that they were relegated to the Tailteann Cup, and, right from the start said they'd embrace it. So, but it will be kind of on a personal level, it'll be for fans in Meath to watch, particularly to see the two of them head to head. But I'd imagine they're two of them are very good friends as well. So sometimes it can be it means more to the fans or to the wider public in the country than maybe it does to themselves. But you'd expect Meath to win it. Basically, that they found a good bit of form. They're playing quite attractive, and those young lads seem to be absolutely playing for Colin O'Rourke big time now, and you'd have to fancy them. Looking at the other game, I mean, Conor Lavery in Down has, he has united, if you like. What I see from outside is that he has united Down football at intercounty level because of his Kilcoo thing and all of that, and he's really turned that around. So as has Billy Sheehan for Laois, despite all the criticism he has got. But looking at the two games, I'd have to plump for a Down Meath final in that, but then who's to say? We expected probably Cavan to beat Westmeath last year in the final, and it didn't happen. But on paper and on what we've seen so far, you'd have to expect probably a Meath Down final.
And would you agree, Jason?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Shane. Look, you would think that it would be Down and Meath to progress to the final there, and as John said, like Colum's kind of stuck to his guns in terms of how they play. Maybe they're not as naive at the back as they were kind of accused of being, during parts of the league and that as well. So he seems to have tightened up that a bit, but he's kind of still sticking to his guns in terms of how they attack and kicking the ball inside. And Conor Laverty has done wonders with Down. When he took that job, the county seemed to be in the floor in terms of confidence, and they'd really drifted away from the top table in terms of Ulster in particular. And it wouldn't surprise me if they're challenging for Ulster titles again in the next year or two, and if they're in the Sam Maguire again next year, they'll definitely rock a few votes for sure. They're on the up big time, and what he's done off the field is John pointed out in terms of uniting things. When there was probably a few different fractions there between Kilcoo and the rest of the clubs and everything else, all that's been solved now and put aside for the greater good of Down football, and they're going to reap the rewards from that for the next few years. Conor's again a very deep thinker about the game. He's absolutely obsessed with football, and that passion that he brings is going to lift Down not just this year but over the next few years. I think the knock-on effect of what he brings is going to be felt big time up there over the next few seasons. So best of luck to them.
I think we'll more or less leave it there. Unless you have a final point, John, before we go. Oh, you're muted, John. I think somehow. John, we can't hear you. Oh, it seems we have you again.
Have you got me back there? I'm glad that I'm not a manager this weekend, because I don't think the heart would stick to all the things. But I'm absolutely delighted. I'll be certainly in the middle of the Galway Mayo crowd, but I'll be following what's happening elsewhere as well. So the final word is it's tough on the players, it's tough on the managers, but it's fantastic for the supporters, and I'll be. It's turning out into a great championship. So let's see now that we have reached the knockout stage, that we get so many good matches in the conclusion of the championship.
Well, lads, look, you've been brilliant with your time. Really appreciate you joining us, and everyone enjoy the weekend that's coming.
Great stuff.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Shane.
Bye. Bye-bye.